Hello. Welcome to day 226. And of course, we're well on our way with NTI Acts. NTI Acts, the focus, I suppose, is really twofold. In fact, it's something that the Holy Spirit once told me was the middle way. This isn't the same middle way that Buddha was taught, it's a different middle way. Holy Spirit once said that some people on their spiritual path, they really focus on finding the darkness, finding the faults, and letting it go, right? We could call it removing the obstacles to love's presence, which is the wording that A Course in Miracles gives it. And Holy Spirit also told me that some people really spend their time focusing on the light, just drowning in the light and the love of God. And you see this, for example, in Sufism. You might even say that one that sits around meditating for like 12 hours a day, possibly just focusing on God, they're just focusing on the light. And then Holy Spirit told me that my path was going to be the middle way, that I would focus on becoming more aware of the darkness, or we could call it more aware of the ego, and letting that go through, of course, the superconductor process, the rest, accept, and trust process, and just learning not to believe it. And also focusing on the light, especially learning to tune into intuitive guidance and following intuitive guidance. In fact, the other book that I scribe, The Teachings of Inner Ramana, one of the big focuses of the Teachings of Inner Ramana is surrender. And that book says that the purpose of surrender is to give us something else to listen to while we're living in the world without having to listen to the egoic mind. So in NTI Acts, that's really what we're doing. Right? You can see that in the walkabout exercises that we're doing every day, as well as in the reading. We are learning to become more aware of the ego for the purpose of being able to not listen to it. Because when we aren't aware of it, we unconsciously listen to it. We unconsciously believe it, right? We are the puppet. We are the robot. We are the machine. As we become aware of it, we can make a conscious choice not to listen to it. But again, if we're not going to listen to it, we have to listen to something. We have to make decisions in our daily life. We have to have some way of moving about in the world. And so that's listening to what NTI calls the Holy Spirit, but it's really very, very accurate to call it a spiritual intuition. In fact, this coming weekend, you will be watching 2 videos about how to harness your intuition, how to get deeper into realizing what your current moment intuition is. That's the thing about intuition is always about the current moment. You can't plan what your intuition is going to be tomorrow, or in that meeting next week or anything like that. Just like we have to be aware of the ego in order to let go of the ego, in order to notice it as ego and let it go, not believe it. We have to be aware of intuition in order to listen to it. And this is why increasing our awareness is so important. And this is why this meditation that we're doing now, which is the practice of increasing awareness, just becoming as aware as we can be, this is why it's so important. But again, like I said last week, you don't want to do your 10-minute meditation or your 30-minute meditation or your hour-long meditation and then go out in the world and cease to be aware, fall back into unconsciousness. Because when you fall back into unconsciousness, you're back into just being the robot to the egoic mind and not noticing your intuition. So being aware and intuitive, That's our goal in NTI Acts. I thought I would go over a little bit of what was in the reading this week. Let's see, it looks like I am in NTI Acts chapter 5, but towards the end, verses 25 to 42. It says, to know your own innocence, you must do this. You must trust me. Me, of course, is Holy Spirit or spiritual intuition. It's sad because in this world, what we have learned to do is to trust our thinking. And if you pay any attention to your thinking is what's telling you you're not good enough. Your thinking is what's telling you you're guilty. Your thinking is what's telling you you're inherently flawed. Or it's covering all that up by telling you you're better than everyone else, right? They're the ones that aren't good enough. But your thinking is keeping that separation and that belief in unworthiness and guilt alive. Innocence. Innocence isn't the opposite of guilt. I used to think it was, like you were guilty or you were innocent. Innocence isn't the opposite of guilt. Innocence is really that fresh outlook with every moment being completely new. You know, you're experiencing your innocence when you're just kind of wide-eyed, living in the moment, being aware, tuning into intuition. That's innocence. And it says, in order to know your innocence, you must trust me, which means you have to trust your intuition, which means you have to distrust your thinking mind. Otherwise, you'll never know that fresh way of looking at life. It also says, for if you do not trust me, you will not let your guilt come out from its hiding place. And if your guilt does not come out from hiding, you will continue to believe it and you will remain in prison. There is no actual guilt. There's the belief in guilt. There is no actual unworthiness. There is the belief in unworthiness. And we have to see it as just a belief. We have to see it as not true. But if we aren't trusting our intuition, and you know, our intuition guides us, and sometimes what it guides us to do seems difficult. The reason it seems difficult is because it's so contrary to our conditioning. And buried in that conditioning is the belief in guilt, the belief in unworthiness, the belief that fear protects us, the belief that I have to protect myself from everyone and everything else. All of these things are deep in our conditioning. And if we don't trust intuition, we just keep listening to that conditioning because somehow we think it's keeping us safe. It's driving the body in the best way the body can be driven. We have to learn to trust the intuition more than the conditioning, more than the thinking. And it will lead us to see this conditioning. It will lead us to see the things we have been believing with clarity so that we can make a conscious decision not to believe that type of conditioning again. But if we don't trust it, if we don't trust that our intuition is God and listen to it as if it is God, we'll continue to listen to our conditioning as if it is God. Not God so much. I mean, it's not like you think your thinking is God, or at least most people don't. But you do everything it says as if it's a God, right? We have to completely shift our trust from our trust in our own individual mind to our trust and intuition. That's how we become free. That's how we know our innocence. That's how we know the life that is God. NTI, Acts chapter 6 says, as you move forward with me and do all that I ask, you will hear questions within your mind. The questions will come from your own temptation to judge for yourself, which is the desire to exercise your own will, which is ego. But there is no reason to deny your questions. For the temptation to deny your questions also comes from ego, who tells you that you are guilty for questioning and that for your questions you will be judged. I tell you that you are not guilty for anything. I will hear your questions and answer them. Bring them to me in joy and trust, knowing they will be answered. I have a chest in my closet in my house filled with notebooks. And these notebooks are where I sit down and I ask within a question. And then an answer begins to come. And I write out that answer. In fact, let's see. Hello, Ellie. I think I have my most recent workbook right here. My most recent notebook. Here it is. Ooh, this is my most recent notebook. And you can see even it is filled, right, with things. Here's something that I opened up to right in the middle. It seems there have been more upsets this week than I've seen in ages, and they've sometimes had surprising intensity. Since I want to complete this healing, awakening process, I welcome each one as grace. One we haven't talked about that I'd like to look at to see what I may be missing that I haven't seen is the situation with, and I'll skip the name for now. My mind wants to be proud of how I handled that situation, but I'm concerned that pride is a cover-up for more clear seeing, revealing, and healing. What would you say to me? And I'm not going to read all of the answer because I don't really want to reveal on the video on YouTube who I was talking about here. But let me read part of it. The part of you that was hurt, reactionary, and wanted revenge or recovery this week was mind. To be attached to mind as you is to make the error you no longer want to make. As mentioned before, let mind have its experience. Watch, but don't identify. These experiences will have their experience. Allow and watch. Which are you? Right? Are you the experience or are you the watcher? Don't repress, deny, disassociate. That's identification coupled with insanity. Allow and watch. Which are you? That's the guidance. And there's more in here. I mean, when I have a question, I go within and I ask and I get an answer. And that's what's really being recommended here is that you begin to do the same thing. That although your questions are coming from the ego, right? Whatever I got reactionary to, I mean, that was coming from the ego, and I'm not sure what to do about this is coming from the ego. That question isn't coming from my intuition. When I go in and I ask my intuition for an answer, it gives me an answer. It brings clarity to me. One of the things that I was asked to do in this particular guidance was to allow and watch. That's the superconductor process. Don't deny, don't repress, don't disassociate, right? If there's some reaction going on in you right now because of something that happened in your life, allow that reaction and watch it. And I want to say allow and watch does not mean act upon. It does not mean be the robot. It does not mean go out there and get that revenge, right? It means allow those feelings, watch those feelings, right? Just allow and watch, allow and watch. Sit in your chair, quiet, still. In fact, within NTI Acts chapter 6, verses 8 to 15, it says, within your own mind, you will find conflict and attack about yourself or upon yourself. Within your own mind, you will find conflict and attack upon yourself. And refers to this as a battle, right? There's a battle going on in your mind. It says, let the battle continue within your mind and without you. Allow and watch. Let the battle continue within your mind and without you. Watch it peacefully, knowing that a battle that is not given all of your power and faith cannot last. For only that to which you give your power is true and meaningful for you. Right? So one thing that I experienced when I was going through my primary purification process is what I called ego attacks. And what an ego attack was is when the ego got really, really loud in my mind about whatever, right? Just really loud, louder than every day loud. And I called that an ego attack. And what a lot of people want to do is make that stop. Like it's not supposed to be here. The ego is not supposed to be here. This is not saying the ego is not supposed to be here. If it is here, it is here. It's just saying, sit back, be still, watch it until it runs itself out. Kind of like a little wind-up doll, right? If you wind up a doll, set it down and let it, walk about on the table. Eventually, it slows down. And it stops. And that's the same thing with the ego, right? But if you believe it, if you act on it, it's like you keep winding it up again and it'll never wind down. So it's about allowing the ego, watching the ego, not believing the ego. Let the battle continue within your mind and without you. Watch it peacefully, knowing that a battle that is not given all of your power and faith cannot last. For only that to which you give your power is true and meaningful for you. NTI Acts chapter 7, intuition continues to ask for our trust. To trust in me is to give everything over to me. To not trust me is to want to do things your way. Right? So can I give everything in my life over to intuition? Or there's some things I think I still want to think and figure out and think about. Like I think my mind has the best solution. The mind doesn't have the best solution. We've learned this, but it's not true. Intuition always has the best solution. So am I willing to give everything to intuition? Let intuition guide me in all things without needing to think and figure out anything. Trying to solve things on your own. When you're trying to solve things on your own, you are not learning your lessons. You're not being guided by intuition. Let go of any fear that would guide you to take matters into your own hands. Lay aside the illusory will that you do not want. Trust in your worth and in me, and ask for my will. For in my will, you will recognize your will, right? There'll be the merging with Holy Spirit, or the merging with the true self, or the spiritual intuition. So I think that's all I'll share today. That's enough. Enjoy the next week. We're going to continue no real change in the process for NTI ACT. We're still doing two things: becoming more aware of ego so that we can not listen to it, all right? Not be the robot, not be the machine. Watch it, but not act from it. Instead, we want to tune into intuition, feel what intuition is having us do, say, how intuition is having us be in this current moment, and follow it. You know, that's so important. Practice it as well as you can throughout the day. And I'll see you next week. Bye.